I've been told I have an old soul. People say it's because I spend my nights in places others have forgotten, sifting through memories that aren't my own. They think it's a choice, a strange hobby of mine, but it's not. It started with a whisper, a face in a crowd that wasn't there, then another, and another. Every missing person, from every milk carton I saw as a kid, from every late-night news report I overheard, started appearing in my dreams. They weren't ghosts, not in the spooky, chain-rattling sense. They were just there, standing in the periphery of my dreamscapes. A young woman in a dated floral dress watching me from the edge of a dream about my high school graduation. A little boy with a red ball, standing silently at the end of a long, dreamlike corridor. They never spoke. They just watched. And I watched back. For years, that's all it was. A silent, nightly congregation. I'd wake up with a strange sense of melancholy, a feeling of shared loss that I couldn't quite place. I'd see their faces, a flash of a smile, the color of their eyes, and feel an ache. I started keeping a journal, sketching their faces from the fading images in my mind. I'd go online, diving into cold case forums and databases, and I'd find them. Sarah, who vanished from a roadside diner in '98. Little Timmy, who disappeared from a park in '05. The more I looked, the more faces I recognized from my dreams. It became an obsession. I wasn't a detective. I was just a cartographer of lost souls, mapping their existence in my subconscious. I felt a strange responsibility to them. By searching for their stories, by learning their names, I was keeping a part of them alive, wasn't I? I was making sure they weren't forgotten. The dreams changed after that. Once I started actively searching, they became more vivid. It was like turning up the volume on a radio that had been playing static. They were no longer silent observers. They started interacting with my dreams, not with me directly, but with the world around them. Sarah would arrange flowers in a vase on my dream kitchen table. Timmy would bounce his red ball, the rhythmic thud a steady heartbeat in my sleep. It felt like a quiet acknowledgement, a thank you. I compiled files, printed out articles, and created timelines. My apartment started to look like a detective's office from an old movie. Friends would visit and raise an eyebrow at the walls covered in photos and newspaper clippings. It's for a project, I'd mumble. How could I explain that my dreams were a revolving door for the lost and vanished? I thought I was helping. I truly did. Every piece of information I uncovered, every story I read, felt like pulling a thread, hoping it would lead somewhere. I'd send anonymous tips to law enforcement, small details I gleaned from articles, hoping to connect dots they might have missed. A few times I even got a small mention in an updated article about a case being looked at again. It was a strange, vicarious sense of accomplishment. I was a silent partner to these cold cases, a keeper of their flame. The faces in my dreams seemed brighter, less melancholic. I took it as a sign I was doing the right thing. My sleep was filled with these silent companions, a community of souls who only existed for me between dusk and dawn. It was a heavy burden, but it was mine. It gave my life a bizarre, secret purpose. But then, things started to get overwhelming. The number of faces grew. Every night, a new person would appear at the edge of my dream. A teenager who walked out of school and never came back. A hiker who vanished on a well-trodden trail. A father who went to the store for milk and never returned. My mind became a terminal for an airline of the lost, and every flight was overbooked. My sleep was no longer restful. I'd wake up exhausted, the emotional weight of 100 unsolved tragedies pressing down on me. The lines between their stories and my own life began to blur. I was living more in their pasts than in my own present. My own projects were forgotten, my own friends neglected. The project had consumed me. I was drowning in a sea of other people's sorrow. I had to stop. For my own sanity, I had to let them go. I took down the photos from my walls. I archived the digital files. I stopped visiting the forums at 3 in the morning. I forced myself to forget the names and the dates. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It felt like a betrayal. Every time I walked past a bulletin board with a missing person poster, I had to look away, a sharp pang of guilt twisting in my gut. I told myself I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a detective. I was just a person who needed to sleep, who needed to live their own life. I started new hobbies, reconnected with friends, and tried to fill my head with new things, happy things. And for a while it worked. The dreams became quiet again. The faces faded, returning to the silent, static-filled periphery of my subconscious. I started to sleep through the night again. I thought I was free. Then came last night. I was dreaming I was in a library, a vast, endless place with shelves that reached into the clouds. It was peaceful. I was reading a book with blank pages and I felt content, and then I saw him. A man I recognized instantly. His name was David. He was a musician who vanished in the early 2000s, leaving behind his guitar and a half-written song. I had spent months researching his case. In my dream, he wasn't standing at a distance. He was sitting at the table across from me. He looked just like his photos, but older, with tired eyes. He just looked at me for a long time, and the silence was different. It wasn't passive. It was heavy with unspoken questions. The quiet of the library felt immense, a vacuum waiting to be filled. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, even in the dream. Finally, he spoke. His voice wasn't a whisper. It was clear and calm, cutting through the dreamlike haze. He said, "I see you've been sleeping better." I didn't know how to respond. He gestured to the vast library around us. "It's quiet here now, isn't it? Empty." He looked down at his hands, then back at me. His gaze was steady, not accusatory, but filled with a profound, weary sadness. "We miss the noise," he said. "We miss being remembered." And then he asked the question that shattered the peaceful silence of my dream. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, and said, "Why did you stop searching?" The question hung in the air, echoing in the infinite library. It wasn't an accusation. It was a genuine, painful plea. A question from a man who had been forgotten by the world, and now, even by the one person who remembered him in the dead of night. I woke up with tears on my face, his question still ringing in my ears. Why did I stop? Because I was tired, because it was too hard. Because I was selfish and wanted my own life back. All my reasons felt so small and hollow in the light of day. I sat there, in the quiet of my room, and I knew. I couldn't go back. I couldn't unknow them. Forgetting them wasn't the answer. Forgetting was a different kind of death. They weren't haunting me. They were asking for the one thing they couldn't get for themselves. A voice, a witness. Someone to say their name, to tell their story, to simply remember that they were here, that they mattered. It's not about solving their cases. It's about bearing witness. It's about not letting their memory fade into static. So today I went into my closet and pulled out a box, the one I'd packed everything into. I took out David's file first. I looked at his picture, at the notes I'd written, at the lyrics to his unfinished song. My project isn't over. It's just beginning. I don't know where this leads, and I know it will be heavy, but I also know I can't leave them in silence. My dreams are their last refuge, and I've been given a strange and sacred duty. I have to keep searching. Not for answers that I'll never find, but for their stories. To keep them alive in that space between sleep and waking until the world is ready to remember them too. The library is open again. And tonight, I'll tell David I'm not done searching. Thank you for listening.